Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back with you with another young Indian. Right now, we have with us Ikya. Let's listen to her. Maybe I didn't mispronounce her name. She will say it correctly. Ikya, right?
Yeah,
Ikya.
yeah, yeah,
Ikya.
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Okay, I made a mistake anyway. I sometimes forget how to say names. Anyway, Ikya, it's good to have you. Let's listen to her.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mathur. Yeah, so I'll just start off by briefly introducing myself. My name is Ikya, and I'm currently based in Paris, in France, and I've been living here since August of 2022. I moved here for my studies. So I completed my master's in sustainability and social innovation from HEC Paris in June of last year. And then from September onwards, I started working with the OECD, which is also here in France, in their Development Cooperation Directorate. So in the little bit of time that we have here today, I'd like to talk a bit about my career trajectory, just how I got here, what my motivations were, and perhaps just share a few reflections on what it has been like for me studying abroad, and also now my experiences working in an international organization, and a little bit about my plans going ahead, as I think that might be something which resonates more with students listening in from India. So yeah. Originally, I'm from Hyderabad, Telangana, in the southern part of India, which is where I was born and brought up. And I lived until my 12th grade, which is till I was 17 years old. Growing up, I wouldn't say that I was, particularly bright, or I was a pretty average, below average student when it came to academics for the large part, especially until my eighth standard or so. But I did pick up slowly and eventually, and I think it's just been a very steep learning curve for me since then. Um, I think a lot of it was just, primarily because of my own realization of how education could be that enabling factor for me, like how it could be that hook for me to just access spaces which were more progressive, less restrictive in nature. And I just really looked up, to people who were just more well spoken or well educated, or how people were just more willing to listen to their opinions if only you just had more, academic backing. And in a way, I feel like it's a little bit unfortunate that, you need to have all of that to have some voice and agency. But well, at that age, I think that is something that I really aspired for, and what pushed me to just put in more efforts and work into my studies and just become more serious. Um, so I think I did catch up pretty quick, and I did quite well in my 10th boards. And being in Hyderabad at that time in 2015, there were not really a lot of options for me. I think it was just largely engineering or medicine, and just taking up that very conventional route that was largely pre-decided for me. So 2 years of intense IIT prep, and I gave my engineering entrances, and I did okay, but I did well, but not good enough for me to get into the top most IITs. It was a little disappointing then, but I also think it was like, looking back, it was also just like a blessing in disguise, because I think it was also really around that time that my family and we just started to look more into other non-engineering options. And that is when I became more aware of St. Stephen's College in Delhi University, that, okay, it's this prestigious college in Delhi. It won't be engineering, but, it might still give me that
Hmm.
all-round exposure and that kind of college life. But I had only studied science until then, and I was also just, too young to know what my interests were at that point. So I applied for a chemistry honors, and I went to Delhi with my parents for the interview, and I got in. Uh, so I think now, sometimes when I just, take a step back and I look at my life, I think I do think coming from Hyderabad, going to Delhi, to an institution such as St. Stephen's at that age. I think that really was that inflection point for me, because it was very much transformational for me, because Stephen's for me was the place, and I hope that it still is. It was really a place that had like so much appetite for intellectual debates and discussions. Everyone around me came from very, very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions, different ideological, political inclinations. And in every way, I think it's an experience which really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. It just made me challenge my own biases and assumptions. It really burst that privileged bubble of mine that I was living in. It made me more reflective of my own identity and position in the society. So, well, I don't think I learned so much in the classroom itself, but it just gave me that platform and that space to figure out what really is it that resonates with me, what is it that I find enjoyable and that I can meaningfully engage in through multiple avenues. It was through a little bit of college activism, through internships, through society activities, through volunteer work. But I mean, if I just had to say, I'd say that it was a space where I could just nurture my curiosity, and that it was very much very impactful in that sense. But I also really do owe a lot of this to my parents, because, coming from certain communities in rural Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, which are quite, conservative and traditional in a sense, it's not really the norm to invest so much in your daughter's education. And also just, going to Delhi alone at that age, and they were all like relatives and people questioning all these different choices and decisions. But I still had their backing to pursue this path, and I believe that it's gone on to serve me incredibly well, and it's something that I'm very much grateful and indebted to them for. I don't think it would have been possible if it wasn't for their support, like financially or otherwise. So yeah, going back, then COVID happened. I think it was just around that time I was looking up for more internships just to build my CV, to just figure out what it is that I wanted to do next. And it was just around this time that I was thinking of applying abroad, and that's how I decided on HEC. And I also got a scholarship to pursue my studies, so that pretty much sealed it for me. So then I moved here for my studies in August of 2022. So it's been like 1.5 years now. It was my first time outside of India, like ever. So it was it was quite challenging in a way, like socially, culturally, also professionally, because I do think that the education system, of course, is very much different, but also in terms of, there's this whole idea of networking here, which was also like super new to me, because it's very much different from the training that we get in Indian universities. And also because HEC is primarily a business school, we just, from the very get-go, very first week, we had these networking workshops. How do you present yourself? How do you reach out to someone? What recruitment processes are like? What case prep is? And it was just, it was something that I was very much unfamiliar with. And there was not even that, that kind of buffer or transition period for me to shift and adapt and adjust, because mine was also just like a very short 1-year course. So it was definitely a little bit overwhelming for me in the beginning. But I do think over time now, when I look back, I kind of feel like a lot of it is a little bit hyped in a way, because I think what I personally, how I like to think about it is just, sometimes it's just as simple as being curious about someone else and trying to know what their motivations were, why they took the decisions they do. And if you are really truthful to yourself, to your work, if it's something that you're very much passionate about, something that you want to get better at, you'll very organically get to know people along the way, just given how interconnected we are. So I think ultimately it's just kind of figuring out what works for you, what feels authentic to you, what really aligns with your values. And it's a process and it takes time, but there's also definitely a learning curve here. And if I just had to sum up, I'd say that just coming here, living abroad, it's quite rewarding. I think as a person, it's made me so much more receptive to different ways of living and being, and it's something which really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. It made me so much more independent, more responsible, and more accountable for my own decisions and my own well-being. So yeah, I mean, I do think in general it just makes you a little more resilient. So as to what I'm doing now, I completed my, yeah, as I mentioned, I completed my studies in June of, in June of 2023, and then I started working at the OECD. So a lot of my studies, even during HEC, were really centered around sustainable development. And I was more interested in kind of approaching this from a more macroeconomic lens and a more policy perspective. So it was kind of like a obvious choice for me, and I was also lucky enough to get in. So I am currently working in their Development Cooperation Directorate, and just to give some context, it basically acts like a secretariat to the Development Assistance Committee, which consists of like 32 member states, which are the largest providers of aid uh, to the lower and middle income countries to support their sustainable development and inclusive economic growth and so on. So coming to my experience here at the OECD, of course, I do think that there are many advantages being associated with a big organization. Like it's very multicultural, diverse, international, very, very English friendly working environment. But I think for me, what I really find to be the most valuable here is just getting that kind of insider perspective into diplomacy and decision making processes at the international level, because I think it, as an outsider, at least I had very nascent opinions on everything, right? Like, why is this country not doing this, or why is there's no, I don't know, coordinated action, consensus on climate action, or so on. But I think in the last couple of months, it's just made me appreciate so much more the complexity of international politics, and how policies and development priorities and strategies and financing, really just how multifaceted these issues are that we're trying to solve, and how interdependent they are. Like even for a small consensus or an agreement to be reached, there's so many factors that you need to take into consideration. There are power dynamics, there are geopolitical tensions, there's the social contract of the country, there's political stability of the country. And I mean, I don't have any answers. I only have more questions, and I am only probably a lot more confused. But I've also really started to learn and appreciate how much more context specific also our solutions need to be. And how do you really tackle a problem from all these very different perspectives and viewpoints? And how do you sometimes even navigate having contradictory objectives, and how do you decide what are the trade-offs that you need to make in those situations? So it's just this very, very macro level picture of how politics works at an international level. I think it's very interesting for me to see these different positions which the different member states take on any particular issue, whether that's climate change or global trade or Russia-Ukraine war, or really anything. Like, what is the position a country takes? How does it align with their strategic objectives? How does that fit into the larger geopolitical landscape? And just how many levels of negotiations take place for any, even just a simple sentence in a policy document. So that's very like, I think it's really a privilege for me to be in a space which gives me the access to these debates and to just observe how these narratives are built and shaped over time. So that's something that I really enjoy. And that's how it is now. I'm very much grateful for this exposure I'm getting, but I'm also like, I also do know that this is just one side of the story, but in the short term, this is something that I'm really liking. But going forward, I think when I think of more medium-term goals, I perhaps not maybe in the very near future, but sometime I would like to be working closer to the ground, maybe because I think, reading, research, analysis, everything, it just gives you so many frames to understand the world. But I would also really benefit complementing this understanding by just working more directly with people and communities, and just to add those layers of complexity to my thinking and analysis. So yeah, I think at some point I'd
Okay,
want to work.
on behalf of younger people, let me ask you two related questions. One,
Yeah.
what made you give up chemistry? And even if you gave up chemistry, what was it that you learned in chemistry that's helping you now?
Um, I mean, as I said, for me at that point of time, that is what I had studied, and that is the decision that I took on the basis of that, that so far this is what I studied, this is what I like, and I went for it. But I think just over the course of being in college, there's so many different things that you are exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I did not like the discipline, I just did not see myself pursuing it for a very long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was more interested in the other aspects which were happening, and even my internships and volunteer work was really based in the education sector, or it was really of that sort. So I was more interested in pursuing those interests of mine. But at the end of the day, I do think everything is just so interconnected in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And coming to your second question on what is it that I learned, it's really sometimes, of course, very direct first thing which comes to my mind right now is when we're dealing with so much climate policy, or renewable energy, or like greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, a lot of it does go back to a lot that I studied in chemistry, but another way to kind of answer that same question would be that it taught me a lot of like skills in terms of precision. Like even when you are working, you have in the lab, for example, you really do have that attention to detail that you use, and a very, how sometimes two seemingly benign chemicals react to form something very explosive in nature. I think there are a lot of analogies I can draw if I want to, but I do
Mm-hmm.
think that the skills and the precision that you learn is very much adaptable to different contexts in your life and work environments that you go on to study or work in otherwise. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's a very general question. You
Yeah.
answer it, your answer is the right answer because it's your decision and your learning. Okay, anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, just nothing much. I mean, I'm largely done, but I just say that to anyone who's listening this, especially, young students from India, I just say explore, experiment, take risks in life. You just never really know what you end up liking. And especially if you can afford to do so, and if you have the safety nets to do so, I think that's something that we all really owe ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hold yourself back. Do not hesitate to reach out to people. I
Mm-hmm.
think if it wasn't for the kindness of my friends and even strangers who took out the time to help me out, I would most probably not be here. Not everyone, but at least a couple of people will be invested in you, and that's really enough. Lastly, very last words would be, in the midst of all this, I'd just say, stay humble, take everything with a pinch of salt. Always, 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 never uncritically accept anything that you read, hear, watch. Question everything around you. Question your own biases and assumptions. I do think that it makes you just more humble as a person and more receptive to what your life and your experiences can teach you, and that can really expand your perspective. And I do think that there's a lot of merit to that. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay, good.
Thank
All
you.
right, wonderful. It's a good, you told us clearly your views and your philosophy. You've come far, obviously. This is hard. Not everybody is out there in Paris working for OECD. You've come far, and I'm sure you will get further ahead. Maybe we'll catch up with you in a year from now to see what you are up to. But till then, let's say bye to the viewers, and I'll be back with another young person and expert soon. Bye till then. Bye, everybody.